Now, so today, we're going to actually talk about something. This might sound like it's actually controversial, but I'm going to try to make it not controversial. Okay, it might sound like that. Okay, but it's not what you're thinking. So I'm assuming if you actually saw the poster ad that that Jean made, it sounds like there's some. It looks like it sounds cool. It looks cultic, right? Right, the picture of Jesus as a Jew, right? Because the title of the message for this morning is this: a mystical Jewish teacher taking Jesus' Jewishness seriously. Right? And some of you probably saw that poster ad, right? So it says a mystical Jewish teacher taking Jesus' Jewishness seriously. Now, it is always intimidating for preachers to actually preach on topics that are actually more about theoretical matters, right? Theoretical in tone rather than practical. Again, it's always intimidating to do that. That's what I admire about Pastor Fred, right? He can actually talk about theoretical matters on the pulpit. It surely will bore listeners in general. And that's a given. That's something that should be expected. Usually, listeners worry about practical matters or even what they can get out of their faith commitments. The question is always, what can I get out of it? Okay, what can I get out of it? If you notice, I'm trying to avoid saying, "Am I making sense?" Because I noticed that, and he gave me a critique of my sermon. He actually texted it to me because I asked him to listen to it. Because every time he makes a movie, I actually criticize him all the time. Okay, so I think he's trying to get back at me, right? Now, and then that's one of the things that he said. Okay, and then she pointed this out to me too. But I noticed that, right, when I was actually watching the video. I said, okay, I keep on saying, "Am I making sense? Are you guys following me?" Right. So I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna try to stop. Okay, try to stop doing that. I don't want to commit to $1 every time I actually say it. Right? You can go back into dollars for that, right? Now, so I think that when we think that sermons or teachings must solely be about practical matters, we begin to think that Christianity is just all about us. We begin to think about that, right? When you go to church expecting practical teachings, you begin to think that Christianity is just about what? About us, about our needs. But I think that is actually a mistaken notion. Keep in mind that now the knowledge of practical matters is merely what? A means to an end. That is not an end in itself. You guys follow me here? But when you're trying to know something about God, when you're trying to know something about Jesus, that is not just a means to an end. At some point, it becomes what? An end in itself. You're trying to know God just because it's fun to know something about God. You're trying to know something about Jesus. Why? Because it satisfies some of your desires. I hope that makes sense. I can't help it. Now, so, I think that a Christian should have a natural desire to know God or to know Jesus. You should have that natural desire. You do not need to tell a lover to be excited about the details about the life of his or her beloved. When you're in love, right, you don't need to be told to be interested about some of the details about the life of the other person. You're just naturally drawn to what? You're just naturally drawn to desire it. No one needs to tell you that. I assume that as lovers of Jesus, we also naturally desire to know about Jesus. One of the things we have to keep in mind is this. When you're looking for biblically based sermons, so some people always say that, right? I remember there was a lady who actually commented on Symposia, right? And then her question was, are you guys talking about the Bible there, right? Or are you guys talking about Jesus? Right? Actually, we're talking about the Bible, right? We're talking about Jesus. Sometimes when you think of biblically based sermons, you should not expect to hear what you want to hear. When you're expecting biblically based sermons, right, you're supposed to actually what? You're supposed to expect to hear what you ought to hear. Do you guys get the difference there?
Yes.
It's not what you want to hear, but it is actually what?
what you ought to hear. Those are two different things. What one ought to hear is not necessarily entertaining or encouraging. I hope it's always like that. Truth does not need to be entertaining. And truth does not need to be encouraging either. Sometimes truth is very discouraging. So what I'm going to ask you to do here is this. Dare to seek the truth about Jesus. Dare to seek the truth about who?
Jesus.
About Jesus. Right? Now, so do you want to know who really was Jesus? At least Jesus as he was known by his contemporaries. It's very different when you're thinking about, how Jesus, how we know him now. But how did they think about Jesus in the first century? So what I'm going to try to do is this, okay? I think that any Christian understanding of Jesus must always start from the gospel. Any understanding of what? Jesus. A Christian understanding of Jesus must always start with the Bible. In theology, they call this Christology from below, not Christology from above. Right? Now, so when you say Christology from below, you actually start with the historical Jesus. You try to understand Jesus based on how he lived his life here on earth. But again, we don't have any other reliable source other than the Gospels. So even if the Gospels contain if there's some level of unreliability to them, but we really have no choice because that's the only source we got. So that's the reason why we're going to rely on what? We're going to rely on the Gospels. Now, if you look at the one that we will read today, Mark 1, 21 to 45, it portrayed Jesus as a charismatic Jewish teacher and miracle worker. Right? That was the portrayal of Jesus in Mark. Now, do not settle for the fake Jesus. Fake as in CNN, or Fox News. I'm just kidding. I'm an equal opportunity offender, right? Just kidding. Now, so do not settle for the fake Jesus who is conceived in accordance to our needs, in accordance to our biases, in accordance to our desires. Because one thing you should know is that that is not the Jesus, right, that we're supposed to actually believe in. Usually we like the Jesus that is fashioned after what? Our needs, our desires, our biases, right? And that's the reason why you will actually see people who will refer to Jesus as if Jesus was a Republican Jesus. He's not a Republican Jesus, right? Are you guys following me? And then the Democrats will do the same thing, right? They will actually probably describe Jesus as if he was what?
A Democrat.
A Democrat Jesus. Jesus is neither a Republican nor a Democrat. You guys know that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why here, whatever political views you have, it doesn't really matter, right? Do you guys follow me? Jesus is neither what? Republican or Jesus was neither a Republican nor a Democrat. Now, as a matter of fact, probably if Jesus was actually alive today, he might be someone who is politically apathetic. Okay. Now, if he were alive today, okay. So, for example, we will also see people who will actually treat Jesus as if Jesus was a white dude. You guys follow me? A white dude who supports the supremacy of what? Of white people, let's say. So some supremacists will actually say something like that. Some people will think of Jesus as a black guy, right? Who's somehow the liberator, right, of black people from the oppressiveness of what? Of white people, right? You guys see how people are fashioning Jesus here in different ways. So many different ways. There are many different faces of Jesus. But Jesus was neither black nor white. When he was alive, he was a Middle Eastern guy. He's probably the guy that many of you will probably stay away when you see them in the store. Do you guys follow me here? Because again, it's a completely different guy. He was a Filipino, right? Right? Who likes to eat pancit, right? And lumpia. Or probably he's like a Mexican, right? A Mexican who likes to eat at Taco Bell. Just kidding, right? Now, so he was an actual historical figure, right? He was not a fictional character. You guys know that, right? He was an actual historical figure. But sometimes we think of Jesus as a fictional character that we create based on our traditions and what? Prejudices. Surprisingly, despite the numerous images of the face of Jesus that we've seen so far, sometimes it's difficult to discern his Jewishness. Do you guys notice that? When you see those, when you go to Loma Linda, they have the painting of Jesus. You guys following me here? And he looks more like, a guy with the blonde hair, right? A good-looking guy with a trimmed beard and mustache. You guys following me? But probably Jesus doesn't look like that. Okay. He was portrayed in ways that conform to what? How different people imagine him to be. Now, how a Christian imagines the face of Jesus partly determines his or her personal and particular understanding of his or her own identity. How you envision how Jesus looks like, that actually has an impact on what? On how you see your identity as what? As a Christian. You guys follow me here? Remember those slave owners in the past here in the U.S. They envisioned Jesus as someone who's what? Who look a certain way. You guys follow me? Who will actually, what they do is that they try to project, what they want Jesus to be, right? But Jesus is not a byproduct of our projected image, right? He's not a product of that. Okay. Now, so the renewal of our understanding of Jesus should play a role in the transformation of our lives. So, if the task of this group is the renewing of minds in order for our lives to be what? Transformed. One of the first things we need to do is to somehow change our image of Jesus. And that's what I'm going to try to do here. Right? Mark 1:21-45 describes Jesus as a charismatic Jewish teacher, mystical teacher, right, in the first century. That's who he was. Okay. No one can claim that he or she wants to know Jesus without taking any serious attention on who he really was when he was actually what? Here. Now, one who claims that he or she wants to know Jesus but at the same time lacks any concern about Jesus' real identity. Suppose you're one of those people, right? You claim that you want to know Jesus, but at the same time you have no concern about what exactly is his what? Real identity. Then probably you don't really want to know Jesus. You just want to know Jesus who can help you out when you're in need. But you don't really have an interest in knowing who he really was. Now, I hope I'm making sense here. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, so let's look at Mark 1:21-45. One thing we will see here is that Jesus was actually portrayed as having two roles. He was portrayed as someone who is a teacher and someone who was what? A miracle worker. Okay, a teacher and what? A miracle worker. Now, so first, let's look at, I only have 2 points here, right? Jesus, the Jewish teacher, right? And then Jesus, the miracle worker. That's it. Right? So, pretty simple. We don't need an outline for that, right? So, Jesus taught in the synagogue, if you guys noticed, based on what we read. In a way, Jesus treated himself as a member of the Jewish religion. As I already mentioned last week, he was not officially ordained as a cleric by a religious institution. He was not. Rather, he was portrayed in Mark's gospel as someone who has been ordained by God. He was not ordained by a religious institution. He was ordained by God. Now, he was not under the direct jurisdiction of any human institution. He was actually under the direct jurisdiction of God. He was not a self-ordained Jewish leader, but he was a God-ordained one. He did not teach academically or technically like the scribes. He taught with authority, according to the text. The scribes were mere interpreters of the law, but Jesus was the one who determined the law. Do you guys get the difference there? The scribes, they were what? Interpreters of the law. Jesus, he determined what is what? What is the law? Now, through Jesus, God directly spoke to humans. Now, contemporary Christian teachers, like, I would consider myself as a Christian teacher, should, of course, not teach like Jesus. This becomes a problem in a way in the Philippines. You guys heard about Kiboloy, right? That preacher in the Philippines who has like millions of members now. He even has his own, mansion, right? And he has his own plane or something, right? He actually claimed that he is now the Son of God.
Yeah.
So he's actually teaching as if he is now what? Jesus. He is now Jesus. He is the Son of God, directly ordained by God. Okay? Now, I'm not going to make that claim, so don't worry. Okay? I'm not going to make that claim. Christian teachers today should treat themselves more as transmitters or interpreters of the revelation. You guys following me here? I'm not the one revealing what God wants to tell you. I'm not a revealer, right, of the revelation. Rather, I'm just simply what? Transmitting, and I'm also what? Interpreting. Keep that in mind. That's why you're free to actually what? Disagree. Yeah, because what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to transmit what has been handed to what? What has been handed to the saints, to the apostles. That's what I'm trying to do. That's why we're looking at the text. But at the same time, I'm also what? Interpreting it. Okay. So I will not be able to actually teach like Jesus because I am not going to tell you what God wants us to know. I hope that's clear. Right? Now in verse 35, it says that Jesus woke up early in the morning to pray. It appears that Jesus regularly actually what? Prayed. If Jesus needed to discipline himself to pray in the morning, I think we surely need to actually what? Discipline ourselves too as well. Okay. If Jesus needed it, I think we needed it more. Okay. An account of Jesus' habit of praying does not need to be prescribed to us. I think there's no expectation that you guys should also wake up early in the morning, right, and pray. You can pray whenever you want to. You have to understand, Jesus did not live in the 21st century. He lived in the 1st century. He didn't go to work. Okay. So he was able to actually do whatever it is that he needs to do in order to prepare himself for whatever it is that God wants him to do. But for us, it's very difficult to. You have to be very careful about your time because you have to go to work, you have to raise a family, you have to pay bills. Jesus didn't need to do that. Okay, but somehow we do. Okay, so but one thing we need to actually understand here is this: there's something empowering about prayer. Okay. I can say this personally, probably not as much now, but when I was a kid, actually what strengthened my relationship with God, I think that was those prayers that I was doing when I was about 13 years old, 12 years old, 14 years old. Because I've always been like a little, I'm like a weird kid in some sense, right? I was like into church, right, at the age of 13. And I find that weird because, usually 13-year-olds, they don't care about church. But I was into church. I remember waking up 5 o'clock in the morning just to pray. I even looked at through the window, I would look at the sky and I would just be praying, right? And even if I'm not doing that consistently anymore, the way I was doing it back then, but those are actually foundational, right, to my spiritual growth. Now, it settles our mind when we pray. It makes you aware of God's presence. I don't know if you guys noticed that. Most of you are Christians, but you guys know what I'm talking about. Now, it empowers one as he or she fulfills God's calling for his or her life. Now, in verse 38, Jesus claimed that the proclamation of the message is the reason why he came. That is the reason why he came. Now, out of all the possible things that he could have done to influence the world, why did he choose to be a teacher? Out of all the things that he could have what? He could have done in order to influence the world. Why did he choose becoming what? A teacher. Why? He could have been a physician. He could have helped out a lot of people by being a physician. He could have been a lawyer. He could have been a billionaire businessman. He could have been a movie maker. Right? He could have been a president. He could have been a king. He could have been a general of an army. But if you guys notice, he was a teacher. Now, a teaching career from that time of Jesus up to our present time is surely not a financially rewarding one. Okay, I'm a teacher, so I know. Okay, right. So I could have done probably something else, and I could have made what? Money if I only have the talent to do other things, right? But the number of people whom you influence as a teacher is of course much more what? Limited, because you can only teach a group of people at a time. Especially during that time when Jesus actually taught, he was only what? Teaching a few groups of people, like or a few people at a time, because they don't have microphones. You guys follow me here? So he was only preaching to probably 10 people, 20 people, right? Now, but the teaching profession, which should be obvious by now to many, is the one profession that can deeply influence the lives of people. If you guys notice that, I'm pretty sure you can remember some of your favorite teachers. No, not right. But I'm sure some of you remember some of your favorite teachers, right? I remember when I went to Liberty University, when I, the guy that somehow changed my entire life, right? Got me so interested in philosophy. I was already interested in philosophy when I went there, but after taking the class of this guy, my life has been what? Changed. Right? I was a very, very traditional Christian back then, but after I took a course with this guy, right, my mind has been what? Transformed. And I remember when I left Liberty, I was even crying in his office. But I said, I told them, you literally changed my whole entire life, right, just by attending the classes. Now, and one of the things that I also noticed from my former students when they see me, some of them at least, not all of them, okay, some of them hate me, okay. but there are some, I will see them and they will come up to me and say, oh, I majored in philosophy or I majored in theology. Right after taking your class, I changed my major, right? And I was like thinking, and now I feel responsible, right? I was like, I hope I didn't ruin your life, right? Right? But the kind of satisfaction that you get, that somehow you made an impact on the life of another, right? And I'm surprised. These are people, sometimes I didn't even know that they were like, fit for philosophy or theology. And I think that's the reason why Jesus chose to be what? To be a teacher, right? Teaching is an effective means, right, in spreading Jesus' message. And that's the reason why he was what? He was a teacher. Now, so let's look at the second point here. Jesus, the miracle worker. Okay. Now, at least based on Mark, Jesus was known among his contemporaries as a miracle worker. He was an exorcist, right, and a healer, according to our text. In our text for today, he was often described as someone who casted demons, or casted out demons. It should be surprising that Jesus' first recorded encounter with a demon occurred in a synagogue, which is weird. You guys, I find that a little weird. Right? Jesus' first encounter with a demon, or a demon-possessed person, was actually inside what? The synagogue. That should have actually shocked the Jewish leaders when they heard that, right? A place that is perceived to be consecrated for God became a place where demons can actually what? Flourish. Now, sacred places are not necessarily immune from demonic forces. You guys know that? Keep in mind that in the first century, people generally thought that there were demons in the world. As a matter of fact, they thought that every time someone is ill, that person must be what? Possessed by some kind of a demonic force. Well, demonic forces, right? Now, again, this is not something foreign to many Filipinos, especially for the older Filipinos. I know some older Filipinos who actually believe that. Every time they're sick, the first thing the first thing that comes to mind is, I wonder who is that person in the Philippines who's trying to do this to me, right? Through some kind of, what do you call that? Witchcraft. They think that witchcraft has something to do with why they're actually sick. Do you guys follow me? I know a lot of older Filipinos who actually think that way, right? So you see that way of thinking is not in any way foreign to still to many people today. Okay. Now, another thing that you need to keep in mind is this. So for them in the past, they thought that probably any form of healing, right, is a form of exorcism. Because, you have, in order for someone to get healed, you have to somehow what? Cast out whatever these demons, right? Now, also keep in mind is this. In the past, some cases of demonic possessions were probably not cases of demonic possessions. They were probably cases of neurological, psychological, or psychiatric problems. But again, they didn't know during that time. Are you guys following? So when someone is actually behaving violently out for no reason, right, might be deemed as what? Might have been deemed as demon possessed during that time. But now we know better, right? Some of those instances are just what? Cases of chemical imbalance or something, whatever, right? Now, so, but the one in verses 23 to 24 appears to be a genuine case of what? Demon possession. Jesus was coming and this guy said, hey, you're coming here to threaten us, right? He was telling that to Jesus. I know who you are. You are the Holy One of God. But one thing you have to notice is this. Jesus could see through the facade of correctness and truthfulness. The guy was saying something truthful. Do you guys notice that? Jesus could have responded, oh, thank you that you called me the Holy One of God. You know the truth. But Jesus didn't do that. If you guys notice it, right? This facade that he's saying something true, but somehow Jesus can actually discern, right, the spirit that is actually in this person. I'm not very good at discerning spirit. Okay, right? I remember when I was a college group pastor at Charisma, where every time we will have some people who will join our group, and I actually thought that they were nice people, good people. So I was like, all excited about them. But Florence actually has the gift of discerning of spirit. It's funny how she will actually look at the person and she will tell me, like after they're all gone, right? They'll say, watch out for that guy, okay? Because I can somehow sense something. Because I think she can discern it, but somehow I can't, right? I'm really bad at that, okay? I remember before when we were dating, she can also discern if the girl likes me or not. Right? She can discern it, right? She will say, watch out for that girl, she looks like she likes you, right? And I will say, no, we're just talking. I'm just kidding. Right? But do you guys follow me? Because we dated for 4 years, and then we've been married for about 20 years. So she actually can discern things something that I probably are incapable of what? Incapable of seeing. Okay. Now, so one thing here is that they actually noticed that Jesus was actually teaching with what? With authority. I think based on the context, teaching with authority simply means that Jesus was a teacher who is at the same time has authority over what? Demonic forces, demonic powers. One thing you have to understand here is this. That is actually a very rare combination. But it's not unique. I'm going to argue later on, it's not what? It's not unique to Jesus. But that is actually what? A rare combination. Someone who's a teacher and someone who also has what? Authority over demons, right? A miracle worker. Okay. Now, and that's how people actually ended up knowing about Jesus, right? Because of his what? Miraculous works. Now, Jesus also healed the sick according to Mark's gospel. In our text, he healed Peter's mother-in-law and many other people, right? But if you notice, the Bible says he healed many. It didn't say he healed what? All. Does that make sense? He said he actually healed what? Many. But he didn't say... Now, try to imagine the time of Jesus. That was, of course, the time before modern medicine. Imagine lots of people must have been sick during that time. Imagine that. They must have been very desperate. Desperate for anyone who could heal them. Again, you have to see the context here. If you fail to actually imagine that was what's happening during that time, you're going to fail to understand the desperation, right, that these people actually had. There's no modern medicine. Everybody's getting sick. Do you guys follow me here? And anyone who can actually offer them hope, they will go for it. Right? Now, imagine the desperation that those people experience. Even for those of us who have health insurance and excellent doctors, we can already sense some sort of desperation when we are actually what? Severely ill. Am I correct here? I remember when I went to Florence called 911 one time because I thought I was having a heart attack. It turns out I just drank like those two of those Starbucks double shot. Okay. Right? And I thought I was like having a heart attack. I had to wake her up 3 o'clock in the morning, and then they brought me to Kaiser, right? And then they checked, and then the doctor came up to me. He was a Filipino guy, and then he said, the initial diagnosis is that you had a heart attack. And I just cried, right? And I said, I had my daughter during that time still, right? So I said, I have 2 kids, right? And they're still very young, okay? And I said, do everything you can. I mean, I was feeling what? Desperate, and I was already in the hospital with medical doctors.
I know.
Imagine how much those people during the time of Jesus felt. Many of them were poor, right? How do you think they were feeling? In desperation, right? They're trying to figure out, what they can do. Now, how much more for those who completely have no medical resources or those who have been abandoned by their communities due to their illnesses? How much more for them, right? Of course, if you're already desperate when you're actually in the hospital now, then how much more those people in the past? One of those who received healing from Jesus was a leper who begged Jesus to heal him. Right? And out of pity, Jesus actually what? Healed him. Now, you notice how the leper approached Jesus. He approached the leper humbly. Now, I want you to actually just meditate on that. He approached Jesus what? Humbly. He did not force, he did not obligate Jesus to heal him. You know how when you see those TV preachers, right? They look like they're obligating Jesus to heal people. Do you guys follow me here? But this leper, this guy with leprosy came to Jesus humbly. He asked Jesus to decide on whether to heal him or not. He said, if you choose to heal me. If you choose. God has no moral obligation to heal us. Does that make sense?
Yes.
He heals us. Why? Out of His mercy.
Yes.
I hope I'm making sense here, right? He has no moral obligation to heal us. Oh, He has no obligation, right? But, if He heals us, that is because out of His what?
Mercy.
Mercifulness. Now, Jesus decided to heal him. He asked him to perform the necessary rituals in accordance to the Mosaic law. If you notice, Jesus actually asked him to do what he was required to do based on the laws of Moses. In a way, he was not as radical here in some sense. Okay. He actually sees himself as part of this what? Jewish religion. He asked him to not to tell other people, but somehow this guy cannot keep it to himself. Right? He still told people about it. But you have to understand, Jesus' popularity was necessary for the spreading of his message. And the healing ministry of Jesus was necessary to establish that what? Popularity. Now, so we're almost done. Last 2 points. So why did I call Jesus a mystical Jewish teacher? Okay. Why did I do that? Okay. Now, because if you look at the Jewish tradition, there are actually people who are both teachers and what? And miracle workers. There were other people who were actually like what? And who were like Jesus. They were like the mystical Jewish teachers. By referring to Jesus as a mystical Jewish teacher, I am not denying Jesus' divinity. I'm not saying that he's not God. That's not what I'm saying. I'm merely affirming an important aspect of his humanity. Jesus was a combination of what? A teacher and a miracle worker. Somehow, those two roles are not uniquely embodied in Jesus. They were not what? Uniquely embodied in Jesus. Of course, those are very rare, that there were people who were like that. But that was not. Now, the point I want to make is this. During the time of Jesus, there were actually people who were known as the Galilean holy men. So they were actually like Jesus. They were teachers and miracle workers. They actually did very similar things, similar to what Jesus did. One of them is a guy named Hanina Bendosa. Right? Hanina Bendosa. He was actually a mystical Jewish teacher. What did he do? He was also very prayerful, right? He also heard heavenly voices, right? You know, remember in Jesus' baptism, right? The same thing, but with Hanina Bendosa, according to the reports, he was hearing this every day. Okay, whether that's true or not, that's not my point. But it looks like there were actually people who seemed to resemble what? Jesus. He was a younger contemporary of Jesus. I think he lived around the 70s, right, AD, and Jesus was in the what? In the 20s and the 30s. Okay. Now, he was also capable of casting out demons, demonic powers. He even turned vinegar into an oil. Because I think his daughter mistakenly put vinegar inside the lamp. Right? But somehow, Hanina Bendosa, right, did something to change it to what? To an oil. Okay. Now, another example of this is this. Jesus was actually also like this one Hasidic mystic, right, in the 18th century. His name was actually Baal Shem Tov. Okay, that's what they call him. Baal Shem Tov. He was a, have you guys seen those Jewish people with those black hat?
Yeah.
Tall black hat, right? And then they have, long hair and a beard. Right? I think it goes like this, right? And that guy also actually reported to be doing all these similar miracles that were actually, that Jesus was actually doing. He was a mystical Jewish what? Teacher. Now, do you guys get my point here? Probably if Jesus was actually alive today, right, he'll probably be very different. He'll probably be living in New York. He'll probably be wearing that hat. Okay. Are you guys following me? And he probably will have that beard, like long hair. You might find him to be a little what? Weird, right? At least from the standpoint of, of typical people who live in the United States. Because that's not the norm. Probably he'll be walking around singing, I don't know, I'm an alien, I'm a legal alien, I'm a Jewish man in New York, right? Now, that's probably what he was thinking, right? If he was alive today, he was a completely different what? Jesus. Remember, the theme for our sermons here is what? The Jesus you never knew. This was a different Jesus, right? Jesus will not be looking like those TV evangelists, right? If he was alive today. Do you guys follow me here? With nice cars. He probably look like just like someone who looks like an Amish or something like that. Someone who will actually look really weird from our standpoint. He's a very different person. He might not be attractive from our standpoint. Now, my point here simply is this. Jesus was as a human was not necessarily unique, but who he was is surely a rare breed. I'm not making a claim about his divinity here. Keep that in mind. I am making a claim about who he was as what? As a human. I assume that the lack of uniqueness does not diminish his divinity. Okay? He can still be what? Divine. Last point. Anatomy of a miracle. Since we're talking about Jesus as a miracle worker, let me say something about miracles here. Right? Because I think this might be somehow, so this is probably the, because if you're looking for practical application, we don't really have practical application here. But I think it's better to somehow probably address the issue about miracle. Now, how many of you have seen an actual and undeniable case of a miracle? Let's be honest. Because you have to be realistic, right? You have to be realistic. You cannot just simply believe something if you haven't seen anything that is an actual case of what? Of a miracle. I've been a Christian since I was since I was a little kid. I've never seen an actual undeniable case of miracle. At least when I say undeniable, there are instances in my life that could have passed for what? Being a miracle. But whether it is undeniably a case of miracle, I don't know. Do you guys follow me here? Right? So let me give you an example. I think I used this example in our Bible studies before. These are, I consider it to be miracles. Okay? But I can understand if people will not accept it as what? As miracles. Okay? So remember I told you before, in the Philippines, I wanted to go to Bible college. But somehow my dad doesn't want me to go to become a pastor. Because my dad says, I don't want you to beg for food. Okay, I will not support that plan of yours. But I said, I really feel like I need to become a pastor. But my dad says, look at the pastors in our church. They're like visiting members of the church asking for rice, asking for food because they have nothing to feed their children. I said, you want to be like that? But I told them, I really want to go. But my dad doesn't want to support me, but I need to have money so somebody can pay for my what? I have money to pay the schooling because you have to still pay to go to Bible college in the Philippines. So I prayed. Somebody from Minnesota gave me a call. I never told him anything about my plan. Out of the blue, he called the Philippines and he told somebody that he is going to pay for all my expenses at school. And again, I consider that to be a miracle, I'm assuming. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I didn't contact him. He's somehow related to us, but I don't know him. He doesn't know me. We never talk. I'm assuming probably he heard about my need from somebody else. You guys follow me here? And he decided to actually what? Pay for everything. Again, I don't know him at all. I think he's like my dad's second cousin or something like that. I never talked to him in my life. My dad never talked to him because he's like a psychologist in Minnesota. Right? I remember even when I first came to from the Philippines to here, I called him right away to thank him. Right? I said, thank you for what you've done. Okay. I thought that was a miracle. Right? Probably not extravagant, but still it can qualify as what? As a case of miracle. What about when I went to Liberty University? You guys know when I went there, I didn't have money. Okay, no money. Florence knows. I have no money. I don't have any bank account. I just came from the Philippines. I went to school at Liberty. I was studying to become a pastor. Reese knows this, right? Remember this? Yeah. And then I went there and I remember there was a time when they actually need to close the cafeteria because I rely heavily on the cafeteria because I don't have any money. Cafeteria is supposed to be closed because it's spring break. Now and then I'm so worried, right? 1 week I have no money. How am I going to eat? I was thinking 1 week and I don't know anybody there, right? I was just by myself in Virginia. I was a 19-year-old kid, 19-year-old guy, right? And I was like, and I don't have jobs. I don't have money. And so I remember it was they're going to close it the Saturday. So I ate my last meal. Okay, Friday night. Okay, I went dinner. I said, "Oh, this is it, right? I have to prepare myself. Let me see if anybody will give me food, right, for the rest of the week. The cafeteria will be closed." I remember before I went to the dormitory, I went directly to the mailbox just to check my mail so that I can just go back to my dorm room. And when I opened it, there was an envelope. Okay. And when I saw this envelope, and it says it's from Sister Mianan. Glad Tidings, the old lady, right? Sister Mianan. And I saw a $100 bill inside. She didn't even cover it, nothing. There was no letter. It just says from Sister Mianan and then to me, something like that. And then I opened it, it was $100, okay, cash. Okay. Which is, I find that weird that it actually happened at the right time, okay? And I'm not lying about this, okay? I was like so surprised. I was like feeling, this is like weird experience. Why would it come at this time when tomorrow I don't have any food, right? And $100 in 1994, I can buy my food there for what? For a whole week. But I saw God's what?
Hands.
God's provision. So I assume that is a case of what? Miracle. Now, you might interpret that as what? As a coincidence. That's fine. It doesn't really bother me, right? But for me, I thought that was a case of what? Case of miracle. Okay. Now, or for example, when Florence and I, when Florence lost her job before, okay, That was hard. You know, when you're used to having two incomes and then someone lost their job. So I was telling Florence, you know what? I think we're going to lose the house, right? So I started talking to her dad, okay? And I said, if we lose our house, is it okay for us to move in? I said, I just want you to be prepared now, okay? I just want you to be prepared now. I said, because now that Florence actually lost her job, you know, I think we're not going to make it. And then that was the time when there was also what? The economic crisis. So that means I was actually losing jobs, right? They were giving us furloughs. So I was losing more money too. And there were rumors that I'm not going to have classes for the summer, blah, blah, blah. So I told Florence, we'll just pray, right? We'll just pray. The weird thing about that is that summer, I ended up with 2 classes, right? Not just one, okay? I ended up with 2. One of them was supposed to be canceled because I only have 5 students, because you need to have 18 in order for the class to what? To continue. But I only have 5. So I already knew it's going to get canceled. Until the dean told me, I decided not to cancel it. And I was like, wow. Okay, that's weird. Right, so I told Florence, okay, so I guess we'll be okay for the whole summer, right? Because we still have money, right? And it turns out that the quarter after that, the fall quarter, some people lost their jobs already because some people was let go. Some people were let go because of the crisis. And then the chair of the department offered me 1 extra class. Which I find weird because, again, this might be just all what? Coincidences. Okay. But again, she was not working for 9 months and somehow we what? We managed to survive. I should have lost this house already. I could have been like living in my in-laws house already. Right. But, I don't know. From my standpoint, I count that as what? Miracle. But from your standpoint, it doesn't need to count that way. Okay. Now, so, have you seen a lot of miracles? Probably not a lot. Okay. How many of us have unanswered prayers for miracles? Do we have unanswered prayers?
Yes.
We have a lot of unanswered prayers. Right? You know, I remember when my daughter was dying at Loma Linda, the doctor told us she has about 10 minutes to live. And of course, Florence and I went inside, and we were just, of course, devastated. You know, I remember rubbing my daughter's hair, and then Florence told me, "Can you please pray for her? Let's just try this now, right?" And I told Florence, "No, this is what I'm gonna do." I looked at my daughter, I looked at Florence, I looked at Tress, and I said, "Thank you, Lord, for 13 years." That you've given her to us for 13 years. Now, the point I want to make is this. You cannot be expecting for miracles all the time because it doesn't happen all the time. Do you guys follow me here? At some point, you just need to be what? Realistic. Mm-hmm. What, was I lacking in faith? No, I don't think I was lacking in faith. I was just being what? Being realistic. Because I know miracles do not happen all the time. Miracles are supposed to be rare. So don't be disappointed when nothing happens. Yeah. Something that always happens cannot be considered a miracle. If it's happening all the time, then it's not a miracle, right? If every time I say in Jesus' name you get healed, that's not a miracle. There's just a formula, right? Everybody just needs to say in Jesus' name and somebody gets healed. But that's not how it works. Is that clear? You know, miracle is a suspension of regularity of the events in nature. And it doesn't happen all the time. It's a very, very rare, you know, experience of humans to find what? Miracles, or to see or to observe miraculous events. You know what? I went over time already. I'm so sorry. Now, you know, when you are supposed to be praying in faith for a miracle, you need to be extra careful about the real motive that you have. Some people, when they pray in faith for a miracle, are guided by their seemingly selfish agendas and desires. They treat miracles as ends in themselves. Or, are you guys following me here? Miracles are not ends in themselves. They're means to an end. I hope I'm making sense here. Miracles are what? Are means to an end. They're not ends in themselves. You're not just asking for a miracle just because you just want a miracle. I hope that's clear. Let me skip a few things here. Now, the mere possibility of a miracle is, of course, or I'll skip that part. Okay. One thing I know is this. I think miracles are possible. That's why it's always worth praying for what? For a miracle. Okay. Now, let's look at Jesus' miracles here. If you look at Jesus' miracles, there's some kind of regularities in the miracles of Jesus. There's some kind of what? Regularities. But again, keep in mind, don't treat that as the norm. That's not the norm. I hope that makes sense. Now, I don't want to discourage you. I want you to be realistic. I want you to be what? Realistic, right? You know, it doesn't happen. You're not going to observe this all the time. It probably happened during the time of Jesus, but that's just what? That's Jesus. Because God has a purpose. He was treating that as a means to what? To an end. That was not an end in itself. God is not just trying to heal us just to heal us. He heals us for whatever reason. Right? There's some kind of a purpose. Keep in mind that God generally does not allow miracles. Rather, God generally uses miracles as mere means to somewhat. Some ends. Okay. God generally does not heal sick people for the sake of healing the sick person. Rather, God heals the sick person for the sake of His glory, right? And for the vindication of what? The ministry of those whom He actually sent. I hope that's clear. Okay. Now, the reason I said that because we were talking about Jesus as the miracle worker, and I don't want people to have that kind of what over expectations about what God can do for them. I hope I'm making sense here. And that should not be discouraging. I think it's better for me to tell you the truth than for you to have false hopes. But at the same time, you need to have hope because it's possible that God can actually perform what? Miracles. It is possible. We just don't see it. Just don't expect it to happen all the time. Okay. So let's pray.